Hey, everyone. Welcome to Podcast Insider Special Edition. I have my good friend Dave Hamilton with us from Backbeat Media. Dave, how long have we known each other? Have we known each other from the beginning, or I don't know?
I think so. I mean, I'm assuming the first time we met would have been in Ontario at the first, what was it called? Podcast Expo, the first one, I think.
Podcast Expo, yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's pictures that don't exist on the internet of us together there, which I'm happy about.
Exactly.
Both that we were together there and that the pictures don't exist on the internet.
Yeah, there was some pictures that were on a Flickr account at one time that I found. They're like, these need to go into the dustbin. Yeah,
that's right.
Because that was some of those early days. Yeah.
But that would have been 2006, I think.
Yeah, 5 or 6, yeah, somewhere right in there. I think so.
I don't think it was 05. I think the first one was 06, but somewhere. So it's been 19 or 20 years.
Yeah, somewhere in there. Anyway.
Yeah. So it's crazy, man.
So for those that don't know you, give a little background of you and Backbeat Media.
Yeah, sure. So I started with a co-founder. I started Mac Observer back in 1998, which was a website, still is a website. We just don't own it anymore. Website for Apple users, news, reviews, tips, tricks, and all that stuff. We started that in 98. And then Backbeat Media was formed in 1999 because after the first full-time hire we made at Mac Observer was Greg Snyder. And he was our sales rep. He was previously, well, it doesn't matter. But we realized that sales needed to be a full-time job. I did, because I was trying to do sales and also programming. Like, I wrote our first content management system from scratch because WordPress didn't exist. If I was smarter, I would have sold that. Then I'd be on my private island.
There you go.
So I realized sales needed to be a full-time job because it's rooted in negativity, right? If you make 20 phone calls and you get 19 no's, that is success, right? That's just how sales works.
Yeah.
And when you can program and spend 2 hours programming and know that you're going to have something on the other side, that's what, at the time anyway, that's what I sort of leaned towards. And so I was like, all right, got to hire somebody to do sales. After we did that, we had 4 of our competitors, websites that also published Apple News, came to us and said, okay, you guys have your stuff together. Will you do for us what you've done for yourself? And that was certainly ad sales, but it was also hosting and all the other things. Because, 30 years ago, there was no DreamHost. None of that stuff. Right. So we provided the infrastructure for people to publish their websites. And different people needed different levels of that infrastructure, but everybody needed sales. And as that business, as Backbeat Media evolved, we got out of the other parts of that infrastructure and focused on sales. And in 2005, I was convinced that we needed to start a podcast at Mac Observer. And it was Mike Dunn, who was with Hearst Interactive, I think, at the time. I was at a dinner with like him and Robert Scoble and a couple other people, Dave Parmet. And on the way home, Mike was like, you need to start a podcast at Mac Observer. And I was like, okay, fine. So I started it. The goal was to hand it off to somebody. I failed at that part, but that's okay. So we started a podcast and then started kind of doing the same thing, what I called co-opetition, right? Going out to the podcasters that were doing similar things to us and then beyond, and representing their ad sales and figuring all of that out. So that's Backbeat Media got into podcast ad sales we are, I don't know when this episode comes out, but June 13th of 2025 is 20 years for Mac Geek Gab, which marks 20 years of podcasting for me. And I know I haven't been doing it nearly as long as you, Todd.
What's a few months amongst friends?
That's right. But that basically, once we got that rolling, there's a story that involves Steve Jobs that grew our listeners from about 500 to 20,000 in a week. And I'll happily share that story. But once we got to that point, it was like, okay, well, wait, now we can start working with sponsors. So we were doing that pretty quickly, and then started representing other people. And now that's what we do. I like to say that we represent a group of fiercely independent podcasters, of which I am one, and we represent their sponsorship needs. So that's what we do.
So I don't remember. Did you ever have Mac Observer on Tech Podcast when we first started?
No, because we would have. and the show was Mac Geek Gab, but that's a whole other story. But no, because we had Backbeat Media, so we would have just done it. We already had enough relationships that it made sense to just
there's a name and a show that is long lost to me that I can't remember. There's one that came and then left later, because what we kind of did
was it Mac Cast, maybe was that Adam's show? Mac OS Ken,
maybe it was Adam. It too many brain cells ago, but we for us what happened was I got the sponsor with GoDaddy, which is approaching 20 years next month, which is crazy. Amazing. And still going. And then, that call led to the formation of Blubrry, because she basically said, do you know anyone else that wants to advertise on GoDaddy? I said, sure. And, there's a whole, Genesis story there. But But, unlike you, I got out of the advertising space, like 10 years later, because no more hair.
And unlike you, I got out of the hosting space 10 years later, right? Like, right. I mean, we both sort of diverged, but remained friends. And obviously, in the early days of it, I've actually been thinking about this a lot. Co-opetition has been at the core of my successful career. I've had it not at the core of unsuccessful parts of my career, but all of the success I've had has been co-opetition, and that includes, in the early days, you and I were literally doing the same. We were competitors, on paper, But I never remember a time when that was like, we were aware of it, obviously, because we're not morons. Well, at least not in some ways. But like, it made more sense to share notes than it did, like the rising tide, all of that. I don't know.
And there's something. And there was trading of podcasters would move around. And it was all one big happy family.
It really was. I mean, and that was it. Podcasting was, and to a degree still is, small. I mean, it's much smaller than radio now, but it's much bigger than it was back then. But it always benefited us to bond together. And we had the Association for Downloadable Media, which is a whole thing most people don't even know about.
That's a whole nother story.
But that's where the core of what people now know as the IAB standards for podcasting started. Like that, and we tried to pitch it to the IAB back then, and they told us to pound sand. But that's a whole other conversation.
The first 8 pages, the ADM 8-page document that we created for podcast measurement, went into the very first standards document. So there is 8 pages of the stuff we created in 2008.
7? I was going to say 7.
Whatever it was. Somewhere in there. And, and no one knows that, but maybe a handful of people.
I think it was you, me, Rob Walsh, Susan Bratton was there.
Angelo,
Angelo, right? Yeah. Matt Levine from Cashfly was like nearby. Yeah. So, And, the whole ADM story is another story. But, the reason it is part of this story.
Yeah, sure.
So we don't need to go into it. And we kind of did. We gave it. Now there you go. But
So, I get these questions all the time, and I thought having you on would be perfect for this, because a lot of people just don't understand podcast advertising. They don't understand it. And largely it hasn't changed that much, but it's changed a lot. And I am nowhere near the expert on this anymore. So, as if you're a Blubrry customer, as you can reach out to us if you're looking for a direct buy. In other words, host read ads. We'll connect you with Dave and his team, and you can work directly with him. But the question I get asked is, what does a deal in the process look like? What if you're a podcaster, say, I want some advertising, I want some host read. Now there's some qualifications, we can kind of talk about that, but what does that process look for that from the creator side? Because you've done both, and you're working with folks every day. So what does that look like for a newbie? Someone's come in and said, I want advertising.
Yeah, it's a great question, right? No, because and I think it's one of the things you touched on it that makes Backbeat Media, that gives us sort of the strength in the niche that we have, is that I am a podcaster and I also run Backbeat. So like, we literally have built this business to be what I want as a podcaster. And I cut out a word in there that most people might think I should add. What I would want as a podcaster. No. It's what I want.
That's what we did with. That's what we did with Blubrry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's because I'm still that podcaster. In fact, now I do 3 shows, and I want what I want to get host-read ads. And so that's the business that we built. And the way it works is, somebody, you introduce them to us, or they come in through other channels or whatever. We start talking. We, like you said, we talk about some qualifications, minimum monthly or minimum downloads per episode, that kind of thing, just to make it worth your while to do the host-read ads. If you're going to make $12, that's probably not worth your time to bother to create to read talking points and create an ad, and yes, ask your listeners for their ear for that segment of time, that 60 to 120 seconds, whatever it is. So there's a minimum number of downloads that tends to make sense. That's usually somewhere between 3,000 and 10,000 an episode. But there are always exceptions to this, and it's worth having the conversation.
Right.
But, so we talk about that. It all operates on a rev share model. You get more of the rev share than we do. And I am every single time we talk to somebody, they're like, well, wait, which side of that do we get? I'm like, who else are you talking to? This is terrible. But anyway, the majority goes to you. But we do take a share so that we can do our jobs. And what we really like at Backbeat, we're not a network of 1,000 shows that we represent. We'll probably hit 100 shows this year. And remember, we've been doing this with podcasts for 20 years. We're not interested in having the 1,000-show network. There's nothing wrong with that. I have many friends who have 1,000-show networks. They're doing just fine. We are also doing just fine.
And they probably have less hair than you do, though.
They do. It may probably, but also they either have much larger teams in order to provide individual representation per show, or they can't provide individual representation per show. And the good ones are very transparent about what they can and can't do for you. And we all are. And we tell people we turn away more shows than we take in, obviously. But, so we'll put a deal together. We'll say, okay, great. It's all rev share. You don't pay us anything up front. We don't pay you anything up front. And then we get to work. We start pitching your show. There's always in our world anyway, every host has veto power at every stage of the operation. If you don't want a sponsor, we don't want to give you that sponsor. That's bad for everyone. You, your listeners, and the sponsor. And us, but your listeners and the sponsor are the important ones in the equation as far as we're concerned. So we make sure that it's a good fit. We put the deal together. We make sure that you're going to get enough ads to really, truly test performance of your show initially, and then hopefully, it moves on and it stays like on a renewal plan and all of that stuff, and everybody can just kind of keep on trucking. But that's what it looks like. And then, we'll go make the deal with the sponsor. We work with you on what your available inventory is, and every show has different available inventory, and that's totally fine. And then we give you the talking points, and that's just a bullet list usually. Maybe one little bit of it is verbatim, usually what we call the call to action.
Yes, the inimitable call to action. Go buy this here.
Go visit, whatever, coda.io/MGG, right? Like that whole thing is the verbatim part, but the rest of it is up to you to do in your natural voice and cadence, and we will certainly coach you and give you advice and answer questions, but we never dictate because we are fiercely independent podcasters too. And then when we get paid, we pay you, and that's how it works.
What's funny is you made reference to the if you don't want the deal, we don't want the deal. And, I remember one time I got the pitch by Casper. They were, I don't think they exist anymore, but they've changed into something. But the Casper mattress, you remember the Casper?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They sent me a mattress and said, try it. Tell us how you like it. And that thing sucked. And I'm thinking to myself, at least for me, it sucked.
Sure.
And I said to them,
we've had several mattresses over the years. And the Casper mattress that we had was awesome. And right at the same time they were doing a lot of sponsorships, I stayed at an Airbnb in San Francisco. And 2 nights in, I was like, I am getting the best sleep of my life here. And I pulled up the bottom sheet to see, and it was a Casper mattress.
That's
I was like,
funny.
oh, look at that. What a great thing. Now I can work that into my personal experience in the next spot. But that, like, if you don't like Casper mattresses, we don't want you redoing those raids. Of course not.
Because for me, it was like,
Casper still seems to exist, by the way.
Oh, they do?
At least as near as I can tell.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I turned down the deal because I just knew in my heart that I just couldn't produce this. I did do a blog post for them and then had them do a review, and I had to really teetotal the line or something. But anyway, I didn't take the advertising. But but that's the key here. If you feel you can't represent something, you can say no.
Yes. And now sometimes I'll have somebody say no. Like, we have in order to grow our business, what we do, we're nerds. I told you, I built the first content management system from scratch for Mac Observer. So we've built a lot of software in-house, like I know you have, because you're nerds over there too. And I say that in absolutely the best way. And last year, we took a look and said, okay, what if we want to double the size of, double the number of shows that we have? Where would our pain points be, right? We know what we want to do. We want to be able to represent the shows the same way. And the vetting process, the process of making sure that we are only putting shows on a proposal that want to be on that proposal. So that was something where it was already a pain point. So if we grew, it was just going to grow. So we rejiggered all of that. We wrote from scratch a complete vetting system. And now we can vet really, really quickly and efficiently. And I mean that on both sides, because I'm also still a podcaster. And this way, but if you said no to a vetting, let's say we're vetting for Casper. I really don't think they're advertising.
Right.
Certainly haven't heard of it. But they come in, we're vetting for Casper, and you say no. And I'm like, man, I think Casper would be great on Todd's show. We would reach out to you and say, hey,
why?
We think this would be a good fit, but please tell us why you don't. And sometimes people will say, well, I tried the mattress. It sucked. Okay, great. Say no more. That's it. But other times I've had, in fact, just last week, we had a show that said, well, I didn't think that would be a good fit for my show. But if both you and the sponsor think it's a good fit, then I'm willing to go with it.
Awesome.
So and that's what I love about what the size that we do, that we keep things here, is that we're able to stop and say, let's have these conversations.
And that kind of leads to the question I was going to ask you or lead into. You have you have a very unique relationship with the advertisers because you are a podcaster.
Correct.
That doesn't exist very many places. I don't think of anywhere else.
I have, if the cornerstone of my career has been co-opetition, one facet of it has been being able to do, I'll say, nerdy things and yet still talk to humans. Like the translation layer between the nerdy stuff and the human stuff is something it turns out I'm pretty good at most of the time. I fail at stuff just like everybody else, but it is a skill that I have. And that helped me in the pre-Mac Observer days when I had a consulting business and I would go to people's homes and offices and fix their computers, and I could tell them what was going on without them getting deer in the headlights. And it was like, oh, wait. And then I suddenly, could make more money as a consultant because people wanted me. And the same kind of thing here. I'm that podcaster. A lot of podcasters don't want to do sales. They don't want to talk to marketing people. They just want to do their show and nothing else. And I love that for them.
Yep.
Many of them are much better podcasters than me because of that, or they at least do shows I couldn't do because of that. But that is that secret sauce that we have.
I remember years and years ago, I got my first proposal and it had this term on their flight date. And I'm like, what is a flight date? I'm not flying anywhere. A flight date. And and I had to go to the Book of Knowledge, Google, to figure out what a flight date was. Well, it was the execution date of the campaign or the launch date. They called it a flight date. I'm like, what is a flight date? So it's just, these little, and most of it's not that complicated, but it was just one of those weird things. It's their lingo that they?
Yeah, I have, and some of it's dumb luck, and some parts of it is intentional. But the dumb luck part was we had a business in Austin, Texas, called Computer Nerds, which was doing exactly what I described. Going to people's homes and offices, fixing their computers, and at the peak of it, we had like 30 nerds out in the field, and we were doing TV ads in Austin. And we did radio ads at first and, print ads, of course. But then we moved into TV ads. And for whatever reason during that process, you just kind of learn, like, seat of your pants, trial by fire. It's like, okay, your ad's going to run here. And then you see the insertion order. Like, after you write it all together, they hand you the insertion order. It's like, okay, well, yeah, this is everything. Well, flight date. Okay. I know what those dates are because we've already talked about it.
Right.
You called it a flight date. All right. And, I just kind of filed that away. So when I started doing the other side of it and selling, it was like, okay. Yeah. I see how
now
this
you
works.
got it.
Now I got it. Yeah.
So, obviously you've kind of covered it already to a point, but there are definitely some key benefits of you guys being in the middle. And I think a lot of podcasters I've talked to, I'm just going to do it on my own. And I always tell them, hey, if you've got a listener that's connected to a company and they want to advertise, great. You get 100%, you keep 100% of that money. But if you get to a certain point and you're now wanting to go talk to the big boys, go to New York, or like you go to the different events and have meetings all day with, all these folks, you better be prepared. It's a job. So really, and maybe I've already answered the question. There is a key benefit of using you as an intermediary, if I pronounce that correctly, between you and the advertising agencies. You just kind of are that buffer.
We're the buffer for both sides, right? And for a couple of reasons. Number one is the efficiency of we represent more than one show, right? So these people at agencies, they are tasked with wisely spending money for their clients, right? And so if they can do that with one-stop shop, or maybe not one-stop shop, because they're not just going to advertise with Backbeat Media's shows, but if they can advertise with 22 shows through us and have one conversation to do that, that's way better than having 22 conversations.
Yeah.
And then, candidly, trying to chase you down when they need something from you. Our job is to be as responsive and responsible, but mostly as responsive as possible, right? That is our job, and that is how we do what we do. And it is tough. Like, there's a reason Backbeat isn't just me, because I do too much to be that responsive person, right? We need other people to, like, while I'm doing this or while I'm recording 3 podcasts a week, I can't be putting together ad deals all the time, right? So, there is that infrastructure that allows us to be efficient and responsive. And these people move very quickly that are in that sort of the big boys, if you will, right? The media buyers, either for ad agencies or for large brands, because some brands still buy their own stuff. They don't go through an agency, and that's also fine. But they move very quickly. You need to be able to talk the talk with them. You need to essentially be a New Yorker with them. New Yorkers get bad rap. I grew up outside of New York. New Yorkers are extremely friendly and extremely efficient. And that's what you need to be with these people. You can't dilly-dally about, you want to advertise. So let me tell you about my dog first, right? Like, they don't have time for that.
Right.
Sometimes once you get to know people, you might go have dinner with them at one of these events, and then maybe you can tell them about your dog. But when you're putting together deals, one thing that happens all the time here,
I know where you're going.
Perhaps this illustrates things. We routinely ask our hosts, what could we do differently, better to make your lives easier, better, etc. And one of the things that kept coming up so much that we had to get out in front of it was our shows would say, we would like, back to those vettings, we would like more time on those vettings. Because oftentimes, what happens, and again, the shows just didn't have the transparency into this, so they thought we were the ones going to them and saying, okay, great, we're going to vet you for Casper mattresses. We need an answer by tomorrow morning. Well, it's not we need an answer. the sponsor just came to us 5 minutes ago and needs an answer in 20 hours, right? And so that these things happen very quickly, and now you've got to say drop everything is wrong. You've just got to do your job here at Backbeat, put together the proposal, collect all the responses, doing this in parallel, so that it can all happen in time and still be accurate and fully fleshed out and with all the data you need and all that stuff. So there's lots that happens, and that's why we get paid. I mean, we don't just get paid for being friendly people that happily sit in the middle. We are happy to work for you, but there is work to be done.
I used to
grind it out.
I used to tell podcasters, I said, if you do not answer your email to me within 12 hours and or answer a phone call from me, you've lost money. You're going to be, because
every time
the deal's gone, because, maybe it's changed, who knows, but tomorrow is Friday. And
yes.
Or last week Friday, the advertiser was looking and saying, I got an extra $10,000 I need to spend before the quarter, the month, whatever's up.
Before Memorial Day, because I want to take Monday off and I want to have this deal signed and done before I leave my desk early today.
So they called Dave and said, I got $10,000 to move. Can you move it? And Dave says, yes. And then you email, text, whatever you do to reach.
We have our systems that we've built because email and text aren't fast enough, But yes, right. Yeah, exactly. Usually while I'm on the phone with them is when we're putting together that vetting, right?
Right.
It's like, because I know that's the information that's going to take the longest to get. So I want to give people the longest to get it to me.
Yeah.
But then there's other work to be done too. And it's like, all right, let's go, all hands on deck.
But not all of it happens that quick. Sometimes there's lead time. But when extra money comes to table, it's usually we got to go right now.
I was going to say, this business is both hurry up and wait and hurry up then wait, because there are times, like I said, where we'll get 20 hours to hear from, to get a proposal completely turned around from beginning to end. And then we don't hear anything for 3 weeks.
That's right.
And it's not that nothing's happening in those 3 weeks. It's that there's nothing we need to be involved in. And do we stay in touch with them? Yes. Do we follow up? Obviously. That's our job, making sure that we didn't get lost in the shuffle, because sometimes that happens too. Everybody's got too much on their plate, right? It's how it works. So a lot of our time is spent being proactive and all that, but we'll wait, and then they'll show up and they'll be like, all right, I've got money from the sponsor, and here's the dates, and we need to put this together, and we need to sign the order this afternoon. It's like, yep, on it. Good to go.
Yep. Yep.
And then, suddenly the thing will appear, and that's sort of the magic part for our hosts is you answer the vetting, and then it does go into a bit of a black hole.
Yep.
And it's in a black hole for us too, mostly. Yep. And then suddenly there's the order, signed, sealed, delivered. Well, not delivered. You're the one that delivers it. But, I deliver it for my show. You deliver for you.
And if long as the podcaster understands this, they're not emailing you say, hey, what's up with that deal? What's up with that deal? When's that deal coming? And you're having to respond. And so that's advantage too of having 100 shows. You guys, everyone kind of knows what to expect. They've run through the ringer a few times.
Eventually, but when they come on, when a new show comes on board,
it's that whole process again.
We go through it again, and it's what? That's okay. It's like it's totally fine, because not only do we get to explain to the show and educate the show as to how the industry works, how we work in the industry, we also get to learn about the show, and it's during those conversations that we'll learn. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, so yes, we can do 2 or 3 mid rolls per episode, but you've got this interesting opportunity that not every show has. Okay, wait a minute. Let's include your YouTube channel, your TikTok channel, or whatever. And there's every show is unique, it truly is. So yeah.
So it used to be, again, I've been out of this for a long time. They run 90 days. The days of 90-day campaigns are, my understanding, long gone. So now, or maybe they're not long gone, but maybe the placements are different within that period, or, what does a campaign life cycle look like? And I know there's probably 10 different examples of campaign life cycle.
No, but I'll give you 2. There's what in the business is called test campaigns and core campaigns. Core, let's just, for the purposes of our conversation, let's call those renewal campaigns. Those are the ones that have already been through a test, succeeded, and now are on longer term, sometimes, annual plans even, right? But rarely does a show get a campaign from a sponsor on an annual plan as its first campaign. Mm-hmm. It happens that, if there's a reason to believe that it's all going to work and everybody believes and trusts it, then great, it's all good. But generally speaking, there'll be that 90-day-ish test campaign where, you run 3 to 6 episodes, or 3 to 6, you run the ad in 3 to 6 episodes spread across that 60 to 90 days. You look at whatever you're looking at. It might be performance, which it could be, it's usually performance, but that performance could be a coupon code and how often is it used. And there's multipliers used in the industry to get that up to where it actually is. And then it could be a branding campaign, in which case you're looking, maybe doing a brand lift survey at the 60-day point, or you're looking at, you're simply, you already know what works for your company, sponsor wise. And then they say, okay, well, we just need proof of delivery, right? We need to see that this, if you say you've got 12,000 downloads an episode, we just need to see that you got at least 12,000 for that episode. Yep. And, you did that 4 times and now we know that's great. Okay. That's what we want to see. Let's go. And I'm simplifying and separating, and a lot of times things are blended and mixed, and there's 17 other factors in there too.
Right.
But,
yeah, that makes sense. And of course, everyone says, "Oh, what about the money? Show me the money." So the money.
If I can spend $1 and make $2, that's what a sponsor wants.
Of course,
right? They want to spend $1 on your show and make $2 in return. Good to go.
And that's what I always tell folks. I'm like, well, I have this, I've got a show. It's got 200 listeners, and my local guy wants to come in and advertise. And I said, how much value are you going to deliver to him? Is he going to be able to measure that? If he can measure that, then you better deliver 2 or 3 times value of what he spent. And if it isn't, and if it's just, like you said, a brand lift, then maybe you got a little more flexibility. So, I think it really depends. Again, there's this story about it depends. Depends on the show. Depends on the content. There's all kinds of different things. But, we know that some groups were publishing their monthly average CPM, cost per million or cost per thousand. And and that number has seemed to kind of never have gone up too much from the early days. But what do you see now? And it probably, again, is there a range?
Yeah, there's a range. That $25 CPM, cost per 1,000 downloads, is what that is. Cost per meal is why it's the French. Yep, I don't know why the French are involved in advertising, but that's how I understand it. So anyway, CPM, $25 CPM is still an industry benchmark, if you will. Everybody, when they don't know a show, everybody wants to get lower than a $25 CPM. Once a show starts to prove out, though, you might be able to get 35 or 45. Or we've got one show that gets $108 CPM for 14,000 downloads, right?
Wow, so beautiful.
But and I applaud with you, because that's not something we did. That's something the show does.
Right.
They are a very targeted show, and in their niche, they can really deliver. And so that's what it's worth. And I have people that show up and say, I would love to test out that show, but I can't do, like, they just have an internal limit that says all tests must be $25 CPM. It's like, well, I wish you could test that show out, because I know you'd pay the 108, but I can't test it for you at 25.
Right.
Because I'm selling it out a quarter in advance at 108. So until when that changes, you'll be my first phone call.
That's right.
And they are. I mean, we've seen over the past couple of years, COVID, obviously there was a lot of negative to COVID. There was also a silver lining for this industry and other online industries. And I know podcasting isn't considered online when they put budgets together, but it's online. And we saw a ton of marketing dollars poured into the online industry, podcasting included, because people couldn't spend their marketing dollars anywhere else. So we saw a huge lift during, 2020, 2021, the first half of 22, and then it fell off a cliff into 2023. And that's just how cycles work.
Yeah.
So, but then that did create some opportunities to test at lower CPMs on some of these shows that were normally sold out. And now we've brought those people back up because those shows still perform. So, yeah.
People always have asked, and this is kind of one of those funny questions, how'd we do? And usually the advertiser will be, oh, you did great. Or we met metric, or maybe we'd like some make goods. Or maybe they're calling you for some make goods. Make goods is, I want a few more ads for my money. And, those conversations are always interesting in themselves. But at the same time, there's not full transparency. I was very lucky when I was advertising Citrix Go to Meeting. They made a mistake one time and they told me the exact numbers. And I was like, oh, you shouldn't have told me that.
Yeah, right. We have, so most of the time, it is still the case. And when I say most, I mean the vast majority, 90+% of the time, we get no information. And it's because that the success rates of a campaign, the performance of campaign is generally considered intellectual property of the brand.
Yep.
Right. And so even if they're rep by an agency, the agency can't tell us sometimes. And the only time we hear this is when it's not good news.
Oh, of course.
Sometimes they'll come and they'll say, hey, we're, operating at 70% of goal. And they'll ask for a bonus episode. A make good is if you make a mistake. But in the end, it's the same thing.
Yeah, it is.
Free advertising. But a make good is when it's on you, the podcaster. A bonus episode is when it's requested by the brand or the agency or whatever. And sometimes there's good reasons to do them, and other times it's like, no. But
if someone's been with me for a while, and I want that next quarter, I'm going to tell the podcaster it is in your benefit and mine to give them a bonus. If we can fit it in, let's give them a bonus. Because in the end, what do we want to do? If we want to earn money from our shows, we have to keep the advertisers happy. And people say, I'm just advertising. No, you have to keep the advertisers happy, and you need to stay on point and stay on message.
It's customer service.
Yeah,
right? I've always said every business is the customer service business. And that's all these things are, is customer service. Keeping the customer happy. We are very much a long-term view. We are a long-term relationship company. We are not looking for one-night stands. We want to develop those relationships that are going to work. And that's why, going back to what we were saying before, if a show doesn't want the brand, we don't want the show to have the brand. Because we want it.
The listeners can smell it. Yeah.
100% of it. And boy, as a podcaster, didn't I learn that the hard way when I took, early on, and occasionally I still do it. I get excited. Oh, yeah, I'll take that brand. And then as I'm doing the ad, it's like, oh, Dave, wait a minute.
Yeah.
This is not, you're not delivering this.
Yeah.
But occasionally we get to see performance for ads. We have one sponsor running right now. And it's the first one in years where we actually get full transparency into the purchases. We don't get to see the visits that we've driven, but we get to see the purchases we've driven. And it has been like we are rejiggering everything internally based on the data that we're getting.
Yeah, it's just like when Citrix came back to me and they said, hey, you're delivering brand new customers to us at $23 a month, and it costs us $200 on any other media. Yeah. And I was like, really? 23 is what we're delivering? And of course, I just poured on the coals. Then I raised the CPM.
Yeah. We'll do it for 100, and it'll still be half of what you're paying everywhere else. Yeah. That's right.
But so, and it's like, and with my relationship with GoDaddy, I get a base, and then I get paid a bonus on
performance.
And when my bonus comes in, I know exactly the number.
Yeah,
but I'll never.
That's valuable data. This is one. It's one of the things where generally I'm not a fan of affiliate marketing for podcasts, and I'm happy to go into that or not.
And I understand that. Yeah,
but there are times where it works great, and then there are times where it gives you so much information that it's worth it anyway.
Yeah.
And so that's where you can actually start to really get some data. If you want data about what your show can do, get an Amazon affiliate account. Do a 60-second ad for an Amazon product. It's something that's relevant to your audience that you use, all of that stuff. And then go look at your numbers. Amazon will show you how many people clicked, how many people bought. And then you get to know. I've had
at least a half a dozen domain registers come and try to poach me before over the years.
Yeah.
And it's already written in a document. I send it back to them and said, here's the number. And it's very large. Like 7 figures large. That's what it's going to take is
you have a decades-long relationship.
Right. I said, you're going to have to buy me out for the next 20 years in order for me to switch. And, of course, no one's going to do that. So
probably not. You never know.
You never know.
I mean, it depends, right? Yeah. Somebody's got, a venture-backed thing that they're looking to take over GoDaddy. They would 100% consider that. I'm not going to say they would do it, but they would seriously consider all offers because it's like, well, wait, we can cut off an artery to them by buying all of Todd's stuff. Okay,
I'm definitely a unicorn in this regard. There's no one else has a deal like this. But again, there are expectations. So what? And you already said spend one, get two. But what metrics do they most care about today? Is it spend one, make two? Is that as simple as that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, yes. In the end, yes. For some aren't trying to drive purchases. Some are truly trying to drive awareness. Mm-hmm. And that's where, brand lift surveys, which used to be really expensive. Actually, they still are expensive, but you can do what I call poor man's brand lift surveys by doing Facebook polls, right? Yeah. Do a Facebook poll before the ad campaign. What do you know about this brand? Wait 6 weeks, do a Facebook poll. What do you know about this brand? Wait a minute. There you go. There's the lift, or not.
So
so yes, it depends on what their goals are. Yeah.
So now this whole space is changing. Everyone got to do video. Of course, I've been doing video for forever. You've been doing it a long time. There's this hodgepodge, but it used to be purely audio deals. Yeah. Now you're having a mix. So how has that dynamic changed from your perspective? Are you $23 CPM or $25 CPM for the audio podcast? Where's the video coming in?
Video's interesting. That number is moving all over the place. Especially when it's related to a podcast, right? If it's my podcast and you can subscribe to the RSS feed or, in Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or you can subscribe on YouTube, right? And it's the same content in all places. Obviously, the YouTube one probably has video, although there's some podcasts that just push out audio. Yep. But those are different. People are starting to learn, to figure out that the listeners that subscribe to you in Apple Podcasts and Spotify, generally speaking, have a higher loyalty level than the listeners on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And if you are publishing on YouTube, go look at your stats there and dig into them and see where your subscribers are listening. Are they watching on your page? Or are they watching on the YouTube homepage because the algorithm is choosing to show your show to them because they've subscribed? Most of the time, 80% of the people are watching your show from the YouTube homepage because the algorithm decided. The algorithm doesn't decide what Apple Podcasts I download, right? I choose to follow, and I get the episode.
It was an action you made on purpose, intentional.
Yes.
That's the difference.
That I've always said, and I might even say that this is still true, that no one ever accidentally listens to a podcast. But we all accidentally watch the next YouTube video.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's where the value of that audience member is different, because if I'm in my car or walking or in my house, wherever, and I press play in Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Overcast, whatever, like you said, that's an action. There's intention there, intention and action.
Yeah.
Whereas if I watched a how-to video because I needed to figure out how to fix my lawnmower on YouTube, and then the next thing it does is it shows me your show, I might leave it running. I might not. YouTube doesn't really tell us how long you have to watch before it counts as a view, but we know it's not very long.
Nope.
Yep. And so actually they do kind of tell us, and it's not very long. So, what's the value of that person? Are they as engaged? Are they truly as loyal to you as the host as the person listening on Apple Podcasts? They might be, but I think by and large they probably aren't.
It's interesting because it maybe goes into a topic I'm going to talk here as we're getting ready to wrap up. I just came back from London, and everyone came to me that came to our booth said, "Hey, do I have to do video?" I said, "No, you don't have to do video."
No.
It was women that were uncomfortable with maybe being on camera. The cost, which really, depends. If you built what I built here, that's cost. If you built what I use in the Philippines, that's not cost. That's inexpensive. So it really depends. That is.
You can do video if you've got a cell phone with a camera.
Yeah.
Then you have everything you need to do a video to add video to your podcast.
Right. So, and what I'm finding is we have to be careful and I talked to Apple, and you just listen to yesterday's New Media Show. Of course, I just, for the use on YouTube, just go to newmediashow.com and look for the one that says "is at the end."
Okay, I'll watch. I haven't watched that yet. I will. This sounds good.
So, my concern is that we have a large number of new creators coming in, and as we will, there'll be a new creator. There's a new creator being born every second, and
hopefully one of you.
And the thing I'm telling people is, you don't have to start out on camera. You can start with audio, learn your chops, build an audience, learn how to create successfully good, entertaining, engaging content. Then think if you want to move into video. But everyone is just being forced down their throat. I got to do video, so I'm not going to do anything at all. And I think that's the thing I'm worried about.
And ask yourself, if you think you need to do video, why? What are you giving your audience with video that you can't? Now, the answer to that might be my favorite way of describing what my show's video is, which is the voyeuristic experience of watching two people record an audio podcast. And some people love that. Like, yeah. I say that because it's fun to say tongue in cheek and all that, but it's true, right? And there's nothing wrong with it. But other shows might be adding a ton of value-added content in the video. And, you might get screens, like if it's a how-to podcast, well, you're talking through how to do it, but now you're showing how to do it. And that could be extra value. Who knows? But choose what you're going to do. And there is nothing wrong with that voyeuristic experience of watching two people record a video podcast. That will rank you higher in the YouTube search algorithm than somebody that doesn't put any video on there.
I've never figured out why 30% of people want to essentially watch this view. This is the view they see when I'm doing my solo show, where the camera's skewed a little bit more so you can see the screen. But I'm just, some people like to listen, some people like to watch, and some people like to read. But
I don't judge them.
Me neither.
It took me. I am not someone who generally likes to watch a podcast be delivered. I like to listen to a podcast be delivered. But that doesn't, just because that's my preference doesn't mean it has to be anybody else's. We're all different.
At the same time, I think if you listen to this show on the podcast today, because this is available as a podcast as well as being on YouTube, I think what you will have heard is everything that you need to see. In other words, we didn't show anything that required you to look at a video screen. Yeah.
Other than 19 seconds ago when you said, this is the view that people would see.
Right.
If you're listening, you don't get that. Right. But guess what? You didn't miss anything.
Right? So, but that's a mistake I think some video creators first make, is they forget people are listening. Yes. And where audio creators are always cognizant that people are listening. So, Dave, what is a final tip or advice for podcasters who want to get serious? And I say that word very longly with advertising, because in order to talk to you, I want them to be serious. What's the advice?
Yeah, the question that you need to be ready to answer is, how does your audience engage with you? Because we ask this, we have learned to, and I'm definitely giving away a Backbeat Media secret in the spirit of co-opetition here. We've learned to ask that question. That's not the question we want answered, though, because I don't really, the how is interesting and will eventually be valuable. But the question that we are asking when we're vetting you is, instead of how does your audience engage with you, it is, take the how off. Does your audience engage with you? Because if your audience doesn't engage with you, and I don't mean that you've already set up like a Facebook group or a Discord group or whatever, like, are people so into your show that they are finding ways of finding you? And if they are, then we can help you turn that into a Discord community or all the other things. But the first thing is, you've got to be connecting with your audience. And if you're not connecting with your audience yet, I'm happy to talk to you about that too, because I've failed at this more than I've succeeded. But there's no, generally speaking, unless you just have a monster audience, and even then, generally speaking, those long-term relationships with advertisers are not going to happen if you don't have a long-term relationship with your audience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, it's I used to have a listener named was Sal. He beat me up every week. He'd send me an email criticizing, and I embraced Sal to the max. Matter of fact, Sal, if you're still out there, come back. He finally got tired and quit. But, you know, and yeah, he's a quitter, Sal. And
we want the Sals.
Yeah,
like,
we want the Sals.
The Sals are the reason we get better at doing our shows. And it's why you're as good as you are right now, is thanks to Sal and all the other Sals.
Yeah, and then Sal had people that, on the other side, I had other audience members that came in and defended me from Sal. So, there was this dynamic that was going on. And I know oftentimes podcasters struggle. What did you think about that? Email me here. And you have to really ask the audience. Because when you're doing an advertising deal, they need to know, number one, this show's survival is probably tied around that advertiser's income coming in and helping us do what we do. So please go buy XYZ product or check it out or tell someone about it. Telling someone about it is actually more valuable sometimes than, because then you get 6 degrees of separation and that campaigns explode. So if your audience listens to you and engage you, I think, well, why's GoDaddy been with me for 20 years?
You said something interesting that I think is worth shining a quick light on here. You said, ask your audience what they thought. I would say that is something to start doing right away, because even if you're not ready for advertising, or you don't have advertising yet, whether you're ready or not, once you do have advertising, asking your audience is exactly what you're doing, with those ads. And so if you're not already in the habit of asking your audience things, and your audience isn't already in the habit of you asking things of them, and you've got to balance it, you've got to give them more than you ask them to give you, of course, right? But as long as if you are doing a show, ask your audience for something, not too many things, but something in each episode. It might be, please go review it, and then that's it. Or please send in your feedback, and then that's it. Don't ask them for a laundry list of things in every episode, because then they just won't do any of it. Pick one.
And in my early days of doing the show was so expensive because we hodgepodged it all together, and that's a story in itself. I think my annual cost of doing my show was like $4,000 just to keep it online before the hosting company showed up. And so there was like an honest bag,
Yes.
It was, like, I really could use your $50.
Yeah, that $50 actually matters. Yes.
Because I got a $450 hosting bill coming at the end of the month, and if 5 of you or 6 of you give, that's going to keep my wife off my back.
Yes, that means I can keep doing the show for you. Yeah. And it's always like the way I think about it, and I don't want to say this is the only way, but the way I think about it with my audiences is we do the show for you.
Right.
It's not for us. Now, do we get benefit out of it? Absolutely. We get to be part of this community.
Sure.
I see, with Mac Geek Gab especially, we have a huge community, and I consider myself one of the luckiest people on the planet because I get to be a steward and member of that community.
And I hear the feedback coming from your audience and questions they ask, and I can hear the joy in your voice in answering that, or one of your team members, So that's all about. Dave, we're running out of time.
All right, man.
How can podcasters and advertise? Well, advertisers already know, but how can podcasters connect with you at Backbeat?
If there's a new advertiser, please reach out to us too. We are backbeatmedia.com. It's that simple. Yeah, and we'd love to talk with you. We really do. It is just as much as on the podcaster side, it's my pleasure to have my audience. On the Backbeat side, it is my pleasure to have conversations with all the shows that we rep and even shows we don't. And just because we have a conversation doesn't mean you're obligated to, I help people all the time with their shows that we don't do anything with.
Yeah.
And it's fine.
Any final thoughts?
Thanks for having me, Todd. This is great, man. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a question I wanted answered. We're going to put it out there a couple of weeks. We'll let you know. Everyone, hey, follow the podcast and I guess, what is it? Subscribe on YouTube? I don't know what the word is, but anyway, do both. Subscribe to the channel here at Blubrry and follow us on wherever your favorite podcast app is. Dave, thank you so much.
Thanks, Todd.